This is a podcast which does not shy away from difficult and vulnerable topics, and we ask you to take care of yourselves when you listen. The content is of an adult nature, and we do swear at times.
Welcome to the Autistic Licence podcast. I'm Leo in London.
I'm Shauna, and I'm Carrickfergus in Northern Ireland.
We invite you to listen in on our conversations as we experiment with unmasking in an autistic space. We talk about what it means to discover we're autistic as adults, especially with established careers as therapists. We want people to know that autistic therapists exist and to broaden the conversation about neurodiversity. You're so welcome to join us, whoever you are and wherever in the world you are. We hope you'll find something of interest and connection here.
So, kick us off.
Oh, blimey. Well, I'll mention the fact that we talked before we hit record about the training that I did a little bit of last week. Mm-hmm. It was a face-to-face group training, which I don't do very often. I mean, obviously, since lockdown, a great deal of training that we do and little courses and workshops are online these days because it's easier, it's cheaper, more people can attend. It's not location specific, so an awful lot of this stuff happens online. Mm-hmm. But this was training on polyvagal theory, which you had recommended that I attend if possible, because you had a very positive experience with the trainer, Deb Dana. Ooh, right.
Well, I didn't recommend that you... I think you said this thing is on, and I said,
and you said if
yes.
You can attend in person, you should.
Yeah, because then you get to be around Dana. Dana, don't know what is the way to say it.
Oh, that's a good point.
I say Dana, but I think that's because of my accent rather than that
an American probably
says it.
She's American, and Americans probably do say Dana.
Do they? I would have thought they'd have done the opposite. I don't know. I don't know. Anyhow, now that we've established a completely irrelevant fact of your use of the word recommend, let's hear how it was for you to be in an in-person training setting as an autistic person.
We're not going to talk so much about the actual content. Well, sure, I can drop some links on the subject, which was really interesting. It was a model of looking at experience and the nervous system, which was really attractive and a nice concept to set in your head and a lens to see things through. My main concerns were environmental. So one was just getting there. It was in town, in central London, in fact, slightly west where all the museums are, and like Knightsbridge, Kensington, around there. And that's a little bit tricky to get to from me if, like me, you absolutely don't travel on the underground. If I did, then there's a station 5 minutes walk from my flat, and it's one train all the way there. That would have been very easy. But I don't do that. I would rather spend 3 times the amount of time travelling somewhere to avoid going on the underground. It's not my favourite, as you might be able to pick up.
Well, I'm picking up, first of all, your eyes are uncomfortable. Have you put
I put drops in nearly 6 hours ago, so why don't I take a little break and put some more in? And also take another Benadryl, actually.
Did you take it 6 hours ago?
Yeah.
Well, it's only every 8 hours. Well, if you take it now, you'll not be able to take it later, and then you'll be uncomfortable.
It'll queue up. Yeah. Noted, but ignored.
Whatever. I can only do my best.
I know, and you know that I take you very seriously nearly all of the time.
Yeah. That noise.
No, it's not. It's going to sting in a minute as well. That stuff stings. And it is nice right now, actually, because I've got a little fan on me, and so the wetness is picking up some coolness from the fan. Okay, let's see how that goes.
Okay. So back to
travelling. Yeah.
Travelling.
Tube. Blech. Found out that I can drive. Oh, there's so many threads that can come off of this, nearly all of which will be mind-numbingly dull. But
well, I don't think they are for autistic people, because saying that you can't use a tube and therefore...
so this is, two events kind of integrate here. That's not the right word. Conflate. There you go. That's the word I was looking for.
Okay.
Two separate recent experiences conflate here. So, a month and a bit ago, I went to a gig that we did talk about a little bit at Dave Matthews at the Royal Albert Hall.
Yeah.
And again, for ease of getting there, again, to avoid the tube, I ended up driving. It was either a taxi or drive, but I found that a nearby car park was cheaper than it would have been to get a cab. So I booked that, and it was the car park, the underground car park of a hotel. When I got to the underground car park of the hotel, I discovered that all the stairwells to get you back up to ground level were closed because they were doing works and you had to go in a lift, which kind of completely obliterated the claustrophobic justification for not getting the tube in the first place. I'm not a fan of lifts, less so than the underground probably. And I had quite a meltdown in that situation. I did get out eventually. I walked up the car ramp, which is a little bit... it's not the safest thing to do, but it anyway got me out. So that was a few weeks ago. And then to get to this training in Knightsbridge, again, no tube, that was out. So I looked up the same thing again. A car park versus a cab. Definitely car park was going to be much cheaper. Again, it was in another hotel. So I was a little bit wary. Am I going to end up in this same situation? I wasn't. It was an above ground car park, as it happened. But it was... Anyway, it had its own comfort difficulties about... sorry.
Well, is this not the thing where, like, they sold these prepaid tickets, but actually you might have ended up turning up and there might not have even been a space for
Turns out that this is anyone can turn up and use this car park with pay and display. At the time, there was like less than 20 spaces, 15 spaces, hardly any, and they were tiny. Totally possible that you could have turned up and there would be no spaces despite having paid in advance on a website. So I don't really get the mechanics of all of that, or what happens if that happens. Presumably you get a refund, but how do you prove that?
Then how do you park?
Didn't?
I mean, from an autistic point of view, you're stuck. You've done all of this planning and you've tried to manage and accommodate for yourself because no one else is. And actually then it doesn't work out because there might not have been a space. There was no stairs to get out of the car. Actually, all these things are... And
I'm, as you know, I'm a good planner. I'm a good researcher. I do find the best ways of doing things. And you can be thwarted, of course, by the real world. And it happens more often than you might imagine, actually, that things aren't exactly as they might be described. I don't know what we're supposed to do about that. I don't really know exactly what I'm complaining about, even. I mean, I'm complaining about the ability to pre-book a car park that could easily be full, that you don't get to reserve a space. That's quite simple.
That is annoying. That's not
got
good
nothing to do with whether I'm autistic or not. That anybody would be absolutely pissed if they got to the car park and there were no spaces and they'd already paid a decent amount of money for one.
Well, yes, and some people would be absolutely pissed and like angry, and then they would deal with it. Autistic people, that might just be enough to spoil the entire day.
Oh, it nearly was. Yes, yeah, absolutely.
You know, like, because you've used so many spoons to actually get there, you need things to turn out the way that you've planned them to be, and then they don't. Like for the concert, you know, you had a meltdown, and, you know, we don't have to go into all the details of what that was like, but it wasn't very pleasant.
No, it wasn't.
And there was after effects of it, which probably got in the way.
Totally got in the way of the whole evening. It did ruin the whole evening. Yeah, it did. It burnt all my spoons.
It burnt your spoons, and it made you had to compensate for that as time went on. Yes. So, we need things to work out more as autistic people, and particularly if we've tried to plan in advance.
Yes.
A lot of people wouldn't even try and plan in advance. We do that to try to
mitigate.
Mitigate.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it doesn't happen, and no one understands. Mm-hmm. So then what happened?
Okay, so
because you did actually get a space.
I got a space.
It was above ground. It was close.
It was above ground, and it was because I knew that space was limited. I didn't know that it was a bit of a free-for-all, but I knew that there was limited space. So I did get to this car park at 7:15 in the morning.
Yeah.
An hour and a quarter before they even opened registration for a car, for the training at 8:30, which was then going to start at 9:30. So, it was crazy early, but that's fine for me. That's a comfort for me. I like being early. I can kill time. So I did, and I went for a walk, and I got myself some bits for lunch and so forth. Went into the hotel, nice and comfortable, except that, again, it was a basement room. So I straight away thought it's going to be stuffy. I had no idea how many people would be there either. I mean, my rough count was something like 150, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. It was a lot. But because I was there early, when they did open the actual conference room, I got to go in among the first, and I chose to sit right at the front. I would not normally do that in a situation where I don't want to have attention on me. Yeah. In a training, I will usually go toward the back. In classes, I will, I'm one of those people who will try to speak last when you're picking times to introduce yourself or whatever those things go on. But I knew that I was going to be hot, and I'm going to need to stretch out, and I'm going to be sitting in a kind of conference room chair for 6 hours plus.
Yes.
So I chose myself a front seat for that reason, which was a good move. Something's just occurred to you. I can.
No. It's several things have occurred to me, and if I don't kind of stop and go back, we'll lose them. So the first thing is that you noted that you like to be early, and you arrived at 7:15. And what they had said, I think, was that registration would maybe be at a certain time, but then they would actually start at a certain time. But actually, because of your accommodating yourself, it was so much. If we actually think about that, before actually anything really happened, it was way over 2 hours from whenever you would have arrived. And that may be what you've learned is what you need to do to make yourself comfortable. Yeah. But it's also something that other people might not consider, and it also obviously uses energy, uses spoons. You have to be up early, you get less sleep. That's right. And then there's also that thing of you didn't know how many people were going to be there, and you couldn't even find that out for a long time because most people, the majority of people, in my experience with trainings, will read something like, say it's something like 8:45 registration, 9:30 start. They will think, well, I don't need to go at 8:45, I'll go at 9:25.
That's right.
Because I don't need 45 to register. I would rather have my breakfast and get up late. So then you, for your comfort needs, would quite like to know how many people are around you, what the noise level is, things like that. And you're sitting waiting to find out that information, and you don't actually get it until 5 minutes before the event starts. So everything is so different for an autistic person trying to plan in advance to help themselves.
Yes.
And non-autistic people, and the way that they read that, so many people will not have really planned their journey in advance. They'll think, what's the latest time I can get up? Then then they'll leave the house. They'll probably jump in a tube. You know, they'll come running in, you know,
exactly what happened. Yeah.
And then, you know, you're thinking, oh, that's okay, there's about 70 people here. And then at the time that the thing is due to start, then, oh, it looks like there's actually double that here. And then there'll be the late comers as well. So we're constantly having to prepare for accommodating to other people's styles, when actually autistic style would be, let's arrive slowly and take time to acclimatise ourselves in the room, all of that. But that's just not how the world works. So there's a few things that you said that show how many spoons we burn just in trying to plan for things like that and having to think of things like that.
And that's just arriving to sitting down.
Arriving and sitting down.
That's all we've got to.
That's all we've got to. And many people, that will not have even crossed their mind. They'll have got up, run out the door and find themselves there. And then at some point, like, oh, there's a good number of people here.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't have mattered to them whether there was 20 or 200 and where they were sitting.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I was instantly aware as I sat down, fuck, I've worn the wrong shirt. Now, we go back now to the sensory experience of clothing. I'd worn a very light, thin, short-sleeved shirt. I knew, whatever kind of room, I was going to err on the I'm too hot. So, cool. But it wasn't until I was in the atmosphere that I thought, no, this is just too, even though it was loose and thin, it was too synthetic-y. I needed to be in just cotton or linen. Why didn't I think of that? I don't know. So that was a mistake, and that did bother me all day.
Because it got itchy?
Yeah, kind of just clingy, itchy, too hot. Just too hot. It didn't keep me cool enough.
Okay.
That came to me quite quickly. Then, now this isn't everybody. This is kind of me specific, I guess. Although everybody, I think all autistic people are going to have their version of this. But processes, me immediately spotting all the processes that were going on. And I'm talking about admin, audio, visual, all the stuff connected with running an event like that.
Yeah.
I was mapping it all out in my head, spotting where it was going to fall over, getting frustrated when it did fall over. Oh, and that burns way too many. And there's nothing I can do about it. You know, things like, I mean, I was already thinking ahead. I knew this is a 2-day training, and I knew that I was almost certainly not coming to the second day because I had another appointment. And that was okay in my mind because the whole thing was being recorded and filmed, and I'm going to have access to the video. So that was my comfort, even though I really would love to have attended on both days. So I'm already looking at the guy doing the audio visuals and how he is trailing wires and setting cameras up 5 minutes before it's due to start. And I'm thinking, why didn't you do this 2 hours ago? How are you going to have time to test that all of this is working properly? How are you going to... And it was also being live streamed to people who paid to go online.
Okay.
You haven't even tested that connection yet. And sure enough, the people who wanted to join online were delayed. They weren't able to join in for at least half an hour. You know, there was so much stuff. When somebody asks a question in the room, you have to wait till a mic is brought to you so that the people, not just so that it comes out of the PA, but so that the people online and on the recording can hear the question. And they had 2 assistants there to take the mic. I just knocked my microphone as I was saying that. 2 assistants to take the microphone around to attendees who wanted to ask questions. Neither of them had practiced how to turn the microphones on. So for the first half a dozen fucking times that they did that, the microphone wasn't on, and they'd forgotten how to turn them on each time. And that's, at one level, it's just frustrating. It's just frustrating, and it's not working properly. However, again, the amount of discomfort that I experience does actually, again, burn spoons that I'm rapidly running out of, which I need just to listen and take stuff in.
That's right.
Luckily, that side of it was wonderful. That wasn't a great effort.
Yes.
I'm very lucky in that respect. And I did learn what I needed to learn and absorb what I needed to absorb that day.
Yeah. Part of that was because of the preparation that you had to do that, and you're an adult. Imagine a child in school who is so,
Right.
you know, using up spoons and so much else. Of course, they can't learn, and the subject matter as well. This was based on nervous system stuff, which of course is conducive to bringing you into that.
Yes.
But I'm also just thinking about, you know, you accommodate yourself, you get there early, you do everything good for yourself. You're autistic, you're going to observe everything, and you understand all those processes. So how can we not be activated, triggered by that when we've got nothing else to do? You know, we're sitting there, things aren't really happening, so we're noticing everything, and that's what you would notice. Yeah, I didn't know all that techie kind of stuff. So okay, so that happens.
So this is lovely. What can I just want to point out that I'm really enjoying the mechanics of this conversation. That, you know, I'm doing a narrative, it takes it forward a little bit. You notice stuff and then come up and kind of really validate me as well, I have to say, as usual, but especially today, because you're saying, I hear that this need was not met, and you're first of all, you're identifying the needs, not all of which even I'm spotting as I tell it. Summarising, and then we do the little next bit. That's very satisfying, and thank you. And okay. So then there's the social part.
Yes.
I'm sat with many people.
Were they close? What kind of?
Yeah, I have got a photograph which I can actually share because it's just of the room with all the empty seats. So I can actually post a picture on our own website at least to show the layout. I position myself right at the end of the front row rather than in the middle, so that I could also stretch out sideways, and I was also not centre, you know. That was okay, and it was the best, you know, I had the best seat I could have for me. That was fine.
I'm just remembering when I have this image flashing in my head. You know those seats that join with each other?
Yes.
You know those silly seats?
I know exactly what these could have, but they weren't. They hadn't interconnected.
Oh my God! If they do that, I detach. I don't care.
Oh, good.
I detach. I just undo my seat from everybody. I cannot be connected on a seat with someone I don't know.
You're just going to end up pressing arm to arm for the whole day, aren't you?
Yeah. And the first, and then when you said, I said how close and everything, instantly I had this fear come up that my number one fear in that situation is the person next to me is going to have really strong perfume, and I'm just not going to be able to cope. So I'm wondering, was there any of that?
Well, this is obviously nothing to do with what we put up or the recording, but I will share with you the photograph that I've now got up on screen, just so that you see what the layout was.
I see the seats. Oh, those seats are not as bad as the nightmare ones
see them. They don't
that I have in my head.
And
they don't interconnect, and there is space between. Actually, they're not big, long rows. Like my nightmare scenario would be like a whole 20-person row
it's
connected.
5 and 5 with an aisle down the middle, but you can see how far back they go. In fact, you can't actually, because you can't see the back rows in this photograph. So I would have been, my seat is just off.
Okay.
In fact, that's my seat.
That's your
closest
seat. Nearest
to camera,
the door.
right there.
Is that nearest the door?
No, it's furthest. No, the door is the other side there.
Oh, I wouldn't like that.
No.
Okay. I'd have put myself the closest to the door, maybe part way back, but at the side, so that I could spread out into the side aisle. And then if I wanted out, I could just nip out that door that I can see. Seeing where the door is would totally make my decision.
Right.
About where to sit, and it would have to be on the. It would have to be on the end.
Also, as you would have seen from the photo, it was a kind of 2 rooms that, you know, with have a partition, and the partition was open, and so probably 3 or 4 sets of doors.
I understand.
Actually, the only ones that we could use were the very back ones.
Well, then that's where I'd have been.
Exactly. But I'd prioritise being able to properly stretch my legs.
Put your legs
out, not
out.
crampy legs. So then there's the social part. So yes, I was close to one person because I'd chosen the end of row, so I didn't have some. I was very lucky because it was somebody that I got on with, and we did have some conversations, and that was very nice. I was very lucky. It could have been any number of people that I would have just found irritating for one reason or another. But we did go into little groups of 3 to discuss things or to try out, horror of horrors, making facial expressions at each other. I know. And what there wasn't, and this is bad, I would say, you should assume in 150 people, if that's how many there were, and I am guessing, but if there's 100 plus people, there are going to be some neurodivergent people there. Let's assume that there are probably going to be some autistic people there.
Yes.
And so any exercise like that in any environment should always be optional. You should always be told, if you're comfortable, pair up with somebody and try this exercise out. It's okay to say no. There's a bit of awareness I want everywhere, in every professional setting.
Yes.
If anything involves exposure or any kind of attention, then please say you don't have to do this.
But especially that facial contact and trying out expressions, because as autistic people, ours will not look the same. And we read wrong often.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And that's the other thing. You're being an arsehole if you don't want to participate, or if you're saying no.
Well, no, I didn't mean that. I meant if we do the group.
Oh, I see what you mean.
We have to have people look at us and then interpret what our face is saying.
Yes.
I didn't mean if we.
See what you mean.
I didn't mean if we opt out. And actually, quite often, I think I am in settings where you can opt out, so I'm quite surprised that wasn't given. It's more the content of the exercise that I'm thinking there could be some awareness around. That's not necessarily going to create safety,
which was the subject of the entire 2 days, interpreting safety and danger, and for
autistic people, it's not by looking at people's expressions or having our expressions.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I was able to say to my partner there, this is intensely uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
And be met with, some empathy.
Lovely.
And that was okay. And I think she said something like, let's just talk about A and B. And so we just had a little chat.
Wonderful.
And after that, I probably would have actually been okay doing some of those more uncomfortable exercises, simply because I just got a little bit of a bond with the person, and that that was okay. That was okay.
But you had to do that, and you're confident enough that you turned up in person. You sort of had an idea maybe that things like this happen, because often they do, and you felt able with that particular person on that particular day to share, I feel uncomfortable. That's actually a big ask, though, and not everybody would be able to do that. Many of the neurodivergent people that enrolled probably didn't even turn up in person because of how much it would have taken out.
Yeah, no, that occurred to me too, and then, of course, then that makes me reflect in a very big and profound way on my multi-year training, where that was a feature of every single classroom experience. And no wonder I was so exhausted. That was one weekend a month that we would actually attend in group, but long days. And, I look back, and I've only just remembered right this second that I used to have to keep the Monday and sometimes the Tuesday completely clear. And I used to kind of file that under, this is emotionally intense. Doing a psychotherapy training, digs up lots of stuff, and that's exhausting.
Yes.
Which it is. But actually, probably the bigger spoon burner was just the social stuff and the interaction and having to be exposed to those kinds of exercises and things absolutely not feeling optional, especially if you're in that kind of environment and you're training to be a therapist. Then if you in any way say, I'm not comfortable with this, at the back of my mind, I'm sure would have been, well, then you're not a very good therapist, are you?
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know how different that is now, kind of 10 years on. But at the time, well, I was unaware anyway. I wasn't taking myself seriously as an autistic person then anyway, so I didn't carry that label, which I don't know if it had been helpful or not. But it really, that one experience of a one-day training in person does then make me reflect back on my several years of training and the impact of that and what that had to involve.
I am asking myself what I was like, and I actually think, to give credit to my course, it was very, very progressive for its time. It's not run anymore, but this was over 20 years ago, and I am sure that they did give options to opt out, and being highly masked at the time, I would never opt out. And I remember actually I didn't have any of this language, but now I look and I see that the internalised ableism in me actually made me push myself harder than I necessarily needed to and than other people were. But also it was probably reinforcing the masking. The more times that I presented myself and my availability in those contexts, and the more times that I got validated that I was actually able to reflect back the other person and not strange in my facial expressions. As a very highly masked person, very young, highly masked person as well, that just made me more and more and more masked, more and more closeted without realising it, because actually all of those exercises helped me to hone my skills in masking. When I look back, I can see all of that, and I can see the opposite thing at work, completely and utterly out of my awareness, and probably highly adaptive, because nobody was ready at that time for an out autistic person. The world wasn't ready. It's sad, but it's also highly adaptive of how we get through until such times as we're safe enough to get real with ourselves and get real with the world about how we actually experience it and the level of persona and dissociation we need from our actual true selves in order to function and do well in the world. I just hijacked something else there, and we still got stuff to go back to in your training. So tell me about the heat and how you managed it.
Could have been worse. There absolutely was air conditioning. I wasn't close enough to it. I was, just bored. I never got to the point, as I often do in an environment like that, of panicking, of thinking, actually, I'm not going to be able to tolerate this for the rest of the day. I do wish that I'd had a small fan, a little battery operated fan, and I don't actually own one of those.
I'm really surprised there hasn't been an Amazon order made at lunchtime on the day.
That is a really good point, because that is something that would be really, really useful in any environment. That really needs to be part of my EDC, everyday carry.
We know about that. I think
we need an everyday. It does need to, but it does. And so that's something that I will actually attend to very, very shortly. But there was a moment when I did almost panic, when somebody also in the front row but at the other end put their hand up and said, could we please have the air conditioning turned down because they were too cold. And then I thought, okay, I'm on such a borderline of discomfort here. I'm not going to... I know apparently it was just negotiated they'd leave it as it was because some of us pulled faces, But I, had a shirt button undone that I would not normally have undone in a social setting.
So you were worried that you would become inappropriate.
But normally I would have all the buttons but my collar button done up. On this occasion, I just had one button undone, and that was kind of helpful. I didn't really have anything to fan myself with, and I did see a few other people who did, and they were fanning themselves. It wasn't just me that was kind of uncomfortably hot. Mm-hmm. But I think all of those, that part of the discomfort probably, and this is very relevant to the actual training, did signal a sense of risk and danger to my nervous system, which then dialed up other things that I was experiencing. So, for example, what I was right next to, this was a basement room, as I said, but there was a high up window onto the street, which would have been at ground level.
Yes,
what I mean? You know what I mean?
I do understand.
And obviously what there was to the left of me looked like fire doors, but that was obviously access to some kind of service area, because every now and then I could hear the voices of hotel staff, I assume, joking around, or on a couple of occasions arguing. And the fact that was distant voices sounding either distressed or angry or and they may just have been messing about, I don't know, really activated my fight or flight stuff. And I could not, for those, when that happened, which was kind of episodic through the day, I completely lost concentration. I could not focus on anything in the room. There was something going on out of sight that needed to be resolved, and I couldn't do anything about it, and I didn't know what it was, and it was unexpected. Yes. And it sounded uncomfortable for the people involved.
Yes.
And that was something that I made a little autistic license note about at the time, that wasn't okay.
No, and there's something that even whenever you describe like being down in the basement, and I mean obviously there was all the doors and there was probably stairs and you understood all of that kind of stuff, but then that the staff might come downstairs to have their arguments or deal with things, kind of, there is something that then would make me wonder. I would just quite like to know the layout of this place and how far away are they and where's the door. So I can imagine what you're thinking about in that. It's different than overhearing. If you're not in a basement room and you're upstairs and you overhear the reception, that is different.
No, this was something, I didn't know what that looked like. It could be, my brain probably conjured up dungeons or something because, we were no windows and we were underground or something, it was uncomfortable. We might keep this in probably. I just wanted to read this out because it's a note I've just seen that I don't remember any of this. I hadn't reviewed them. There was a point at which those episodes took me into sympathetic, took me into an activated state.
Yes.
There was a point though at which I just kind of gave up on the day because of that distraction, and I went into dorsal, which I really recognised because it was being described to me at the time. And I noted here,
shut down.
In dorsal, I just wanted to cry and go home. But I just wanted to, it wasn't fight or flight at that point. It was just, I'm going to burst into tears and just go home.
But that's
with a great deal of heaviness. And it wasn't complete shutdown, so it wasn't,
No, but that's in my polyvagal model. I don't use the same kind of ladder imagery, but in my one, I would have, it feels like an emergency brake and then sudden stop. And it is like when you go from sympathetic to dorsal really, really fast. And it's like you go up or going, like this image of going right up over the top and collapsing down the other side. That you really felt the activation.
That works, doesn't it? Yes.
With the concern about what's going on out the door, and then you can't actually stay with that. So there is just a power off, a really, really quick power off. You can't deactivate yourself back down to ventral, so you go up over the top and collapse at the other side. Or, I've got all sorts of images that sometimes work around that.
It's not necessary to talk about the whole kind of theoretical background and why it's related, but what I was really surprised at, I've been to many, many, many trainings, and usually whoever the speaker is kind of gets swamped by the attendees in every single break. Usually they're asking questions, almost always, or quite often they're showing off that they know some stuff, want to talk about their practice a little bit and get some validation or something. Anyway, what was different about this training was that because I know of her via you, and that's it. So other than that, I wouldn't have. I don't think I know the name, but I don't. Yeah. She's a rock star. I mean, every break that there was, as predicted, as normal, she was swamped by attendees, but it was for selfies.
Yeah.
That was it. There were the odd conversations, but generally speaking, people were coming up. She had an assistant in order to take the phone, take a photograph, so it wasn't really a selfie actually, through every break. It was quite remarkable. I've not seen that before. And so that was an experience. There was a point just before the lunch break on that day where somebody mentioned something about neurodivergence or autism. Can't even remember what it was. But it was something that I felt a need to be a little bit brave and kind of respond. So I put my hand up to respond. Actually, Deb made a response ahead of me. And that was actually quite similar to what I was going to say. So she kind of took care of the points that I wanted to make. Nevertheless, I wanted to expand on them a little bit. So I did. And I was handed the microphone, which by that time was fucking working. And I identified myself as a therapist and as somebody who's autistic, and made my points and thanked Deb for her reflections, which were, quite resonant.
Affirming, yeah.
Yes. And then it was lunch.
Yeah.
And immediately that was, we were dismissed, as it were. She came right over to me, and as I described before, I was sitting right at the front.
Yes.
And said to me something like, "Was that okay, what I said?" Which was exactly the kind of the opposite to the kind of interactions that people were having with her, where I'd become for her in that moment, autism.
Yes.
A representative of all autistic people. And luckily, there wasn't anything contentious at all. I was very pleased with how she'd responded and told us so. And then I remember her kind of backing off quite quickly. Yes. And which didn't make sense to me at the time, because I thought actually I wouldn't have minded a little chat. I even thought a bit later on in the day, I wouldn't have minded her assistant coming and taking a photo, even if it was just for you, so that because that probably would have meant more to you than me, maybe, I don't know. But I wonder, and then I thought, I think she was kind of being very sensitive to an autistic person being a little bit sensitive to being crowded or to being approached. And I don't generally have that problem, actually. That's not one of my social sensitivities. Yeah. I didn't know. That kind of just left, that felt a little bit unresolved to me. And I felt a little bit bad, even, that I hadn't made her feel more welcome, or her presence feel more welcome, that somehow me saying I'm autistic meant she dove in, said what she wanted to say, and then kind of retreated in case I got... Very
interesting, even just, like you meet one autistic person, you've met one autistic person,
That's right.
She could have sensed into that. I mean, we're human. We do have a different nervous system, and maybe she realised that. Like, it's almost like she got her fear response, or her lack of curiosity, or her sudden need for the toilet or for food. It took over, and she wasn't able to sense into the unique relationship that was possible between the two of you, which is obviously something she's training about doing. It's the irony of the whole thing.
That's it, yes.
It is an interesting response. It's disappointing if we think about it in the sense that even the most open people are still affected by the stereotypes. It's disappointing that those kind of stereotypes get in there, even with very curious people. Like if it is that stereotype, oh no, he's autistic, I've done a bad thing by approaching him, if that is what it is. But it could also be, I mean, there's another kind of more cynical interpretation.
I wonder if it's the one that's just occurred to me. Let's compare.
Well, I'm just thinking she had a need.
Yes, that's exactly what I was
The need was to check and get validation, and then she got her need met. So I don't really want to know him.
That is exactly what I just thought. That's exactly what I just thought.
Because he is autism. He has done that.
There's autistic. I just said a thing about autistic. I better check that it was okay. It was okay. Brilliant. I'm off.
Right, then I'll leave. It doesn't actually matter about my relationship with this actual human being in front of me.
That was exactly it.
Apologies, Deb. I think you're wonderful, and I'm not meaning to slight you in any way.
No, but
if you're listening, do you want to come on and be our first guest?
Oh, that would be wonderful. You'd be very, very welcome. Very welcome indeed. That was, yes, it was interesting that we both had that exact same thought, really simultaneously. I know that was interesting. And I suppose to kind of round off my experience of the day was that I, as I said, I was sat next to somebody who luckily I kind of got on with, and they seemed nice, and I would have liked to have returned the next day to connect with them again, actually, and maybe I would have been more comfortable doing some of that experiential stuff and the exercises and the dialogues and triads and whatever that we might have done. But again, I did become autism, and you would have become autism because people would have been scheming overnight how to target you and ask you their questions and get free she did, because it so happened that she had just got a new role which involved kind of SEN kids, which I am at 57. And I think she was kind of keen to get my take on some things. But because I knew, and I did tell her that I wasn't coming back the next day, I wasn't able to attend the next day, I did actually give her my card and said, look, we didn't properly connect. And if there are things that you want to chat about, you're very welcome to make contact.
It's interesting when you said, like, oh, it would have been good to go back for another day to connect with that person and maybe do some experimental stuff. And this is probably rejection sensitivity, actually. My instant reaction in a situation like that would be, that person would want to sit beside me.
Yes.
So
I did have that in my
life. I would be feeling kind of relieved. I'm always like, okay, that was a successful day. Let's not push it in case the next one isn't. And like, in case people like me at a distance as this autistic person that says a profound thing, but actually then if you scratch the surface, then I'll become objectionable to them. So it would then, that's what goes through my mind. And so I would be thinking, oh no, if I go back, I'll need to be careful because people, like, I might be cynical that they might want to find me for free consultation, but I won't be able to actually believe that they genuinely would want to find me and sit beside me again. So that would make me even more awkward.
I know. And that's familiar. I mean, that view of yourself is familiar to me, but also to our listeners, because we have talked about, some of that before.
Yes.
I also am aware that I'm speaking from the luxurious position of knowing that I wasn't going back.
That you weren't going back.
I was, there would be elements of that on my mind overnight, and especially when I arrived the next day. Are the people who were nearby me on day one going to choose to be nearby me on day two?
Because you're going to go to the same seat.
Well, that's the other thing as well that I was thinking of. Do we... Because this does depend very much on the situation. When you are on multi-day events that are seated, do you get to keep the seat you had on day one, on day two?
Well, you do if you turn up 2 hours early.
Exactly. That is exactly what would have been on my mind. The idea of sitting anywhere else further back would have been given my physical discomfort on day one, you know, I would have definitely been there very early to snag that or a similar seat.
Yeah.
And the people who were with me on day one might not as well. And I would have interpreted. I know I would have interpreted.
You'd have interpreted that.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would have been RSD right there. I would have gone, oh, you don't want to sit next to me.
That's right. That's right. Or they do, or certain people are targeting you, but for that reason of free consultation. And then sometimes we can lean into that because that's a way to pass the time, and it is still like a superficial kind of thing.
To have a social experience.
Yeah. So you didn't hand out autistic license badges or anything?
I did have some with me.
Did you hand any out?
I did not hand any out. I didn't mention it.
I actually would rather that you didn't.
I did or didn't?
I asked the question because I think it's the kind of thing that you might
do. Yes.
But
that's it.
I didn't have like a hope that you would answer that you did.
So now you know what it's like to go on a training with 150 other therapists if you're autistic. No, you don't. You know what it was like for me.
Yeah.
And that's all we can know.
That's all we can know.
Should we say goodbye?
We can say goodbye.
Okay.
Bye-bye, lovely people.
Thanks for being with us. Yes, thank you, lovely people.
Thank you for listening to the Autistic License podcast. You can connect with us via Instagram, Facebook at autisticlicense.com or by email at autisticlicense@gmail.com. At this point, Leo likes me to spell the word license because we spell it in different ways in different parts of the world. We spell it LICENCE. We also have a thriving Facebook community. You can search for Autistic License Shauna and Leo on Facebook, or you can click on the link in the show notes.